I can't sit here and say we're closer on any deal. Obviously, we have an excess in starting pitching, outfielders, quality, and some depth. So I think that with our guys, just talking through, kicking the tires on opportunities and seeing what makes sense. So ultimately, we're going to try to make our club better. And I think the challenge is to look at a pretty good ball club and to feel that you need to tweak it a little bit. And so I think that we're really cognizant of trying to, acquire the right player that makes sense for our club, our culture, and it's difficult.
How much do you think is predicated on whether Harper signs some place to see what added moves can be made and the unlikeliness that's going to happen this weekend?
Right. There's some of that, but I still think that there's a process that our guys go through and not to, it's a luxury when you're in a situation where you have a lot of good players already on your 40-man roster that you don't need to chase a certain player, overpay. What he decides to do or where he decides to go is going to influence the market. But I think for us, we're pretty clear vision on some of the guys that we're targeting and how we want to go about it. They're out there. Couple free agents, couple pitchers, couple position players. Andy, maybe a catcher. Yeah. So Cody's actually at the ballpark this week. Seager is in town as well. Some other guys at the ballpark working with Robert Van Stoyak, a couple of our other hitting guys, Brett Brown. I think for Cody, it was a tough year. It was a grind for him with his slow start. But if you look at the surface line, it wasn't bad, and then now you kind of introduce the defense and the versatility for a second-year player, still pretty good. To your question, I think if you look at the way that he fared against left-handed pitching this year was a little surprising to all of us, and Cody was disappointed in that. Just making the adjustment. I don't think he was synced up all year with his mechanics, and so there were spurts where he was really good, but just looking at the overall production speaks to how talented he is. So there's a mechanical piece, there's an approach piece. I think with 2 strikes, using the whole field, I think when he did that, he was better. But he's aware of all that.
What's the role going to be for Kenta, Ross, and Julio? Is there going to be some competition in the spring training?
Well, there's always going to be competition. I think that's good, and I think that the players would expect that. Kenta's going to start. We expect Ross to compete for a starting job. He was an all-star last year, and there were some things late with health that checked him up a little bit, but he had a heck of a year. And so he's going to get opportunities to build on the innings pitched from last year. With Julio, there's going to be an innings limit, and what that number is, we don't know yet. But we got to figure out, how to kind of go about ramping him up for the season. So, but ultimately, we see Julio as a major league starter. Yeah. Yeah.
What do you know about maybe what kind of work that entails right now, and how hopeful are you that he could get a little bit more of his ego back?
Very hopeful. I think that if anyone sets their mind to something that they want to sort of tap back into, it's Clayton. He's healthy, so I don't think it's not a structural type thing. It's kind of a body biodynamic kind of situation. Who he's doing it with, it's our medical staff, Brandon McDaniel, strength and conditioning guy, and outside of that, I really don't know. But if you look back at what Clayton did this year, still pretty good. And there was a couple, mistakes with the slider, the fastball, but he can still pitch when he needs to pitch. And but I do expect an uptick in velocity next year. Well, Verlander for one. I mean, I don't think we're going to see 97 out of Clayton, but there's guys that find that uptick in velocity, and there's so much data now, body movement and things, and how you could be kind of out of whack with your mechanics that you can kind of work on and work through, that it's in there. And the number one thing for me is his work ethic, his desire, and he's healthy.
You mentioned he was still very successful, obviously.
Yeah.
How necessary is it to get the velocity back down?
Well, it just is going to increase his margin, and I think that Clayton feels that there's more in there. We do medically, and so it's just going to make him that much better. And the trust to execute a fastball, glove side, I think that confidence that he can touch 92, 93 consistently is going to make it that much tougher on a hitter, make his slider that much better too. So he's pretty set that he wants to see that number tick up.
Do you think this could be an impetus for him to finally get that change up together? He's been trying to throw it for 10 years, I think.
You know what? I don't think so, Tim. Because I think the changeup is a field pitch, and as good as Clayton is, as great as he is, that's something that he just doesn't have the comfort level and trust yet. Could that change? Possibly. But I think if you saw last year a little bit where there was a slower slider that was different from the fastball velocity or his typical slider, that kind of essentially acted as a change with the depth. So when it's 87-ish and then the fastball plays at 92, there's the variance in velocity. But I think the change is probably not going to be. It's a couple times a game, maybe.
The slower one kind of disappeared after he came back from was that just a physical thing that was difficult to execute that pitch?
I think it's one of those things where in talking to Clayton, I don't think it was necessarily physical. It's more of the feel of he felt at times you're slowing your hand down. And the hand speed deception to get it to be 87 versus 90, he was tinkering a little bit with the grip. But for me, he's always trying to, master something. But with the curveball, I think there's an uptick in the curveball usage this year. Acts again as a change in velocity, and the variance in speeds with the slider. Yes.
Two parts for you. You lost your general manager who was so instrumental in helping you build two pennant-winning teams to your arch rival. The first part of the question is, what was your reaction when you heard the news that Farhan was going to be the Giants president of baseball ops?
First reaction was my honest reaction. No, I was happy for him. I am happy for him. It's a great opportunity. It's a great rivalry. It's a great city, and so for him to have connections to the Bay Area, to kind of be able to put his footprint on an organization, I think it's great for him. It's going to be a good challenge. I'm losing a friend, a colleague, a teammate. So Farhan taught me a ton. And so when you're talking about old school, new school, analytics, eye test, all that stuff, we had a lot of debates. And so the Giants are certainly better for it. But that's a big hole for us to fill.
And you kind of alluded to the second part of the question. I think that there's been some expectation that Farhan and not see eye to eye on all things because of that sort of debate that you're talking about. You obviously know both men very well. You've worked for both, under both. What's your thought about that dynamic and any predictions?
I think the only reason they won't see eye to eye is the height discrepancy. Not many people see eye to eye with Boch. But no, you know what? I honestly, they've obviously connected, and I don't see that as a problem. And I think that that's an unfair judgment on Farhan. You talk to players that spend a lot of time with them, that he's earned that trust, and talking about performing and weaknesses versus strengths and things like that. So there's certainly an analytic background, but there's a baseball player trying to appreciate how hard this game is to play in there too.
Dave, you spent the majority of your big league career as a player and coach in the NL West. As you look forward to 2019, can you kind of assess how good the division looks to you right now?
It's a competitive division. I think that I'm biased, I guess, because I spend a lot of time in the West, and I think that we don't get that fair shake as far as the quality of teams and the parity. San Diego's really coming. They've got, many people say, the best system in baseball. Very good position player group. Arizona, their position player group, they can pitch. They've got some holes to fill, but I think Torrey's done a tremendous job with that team. Colorado, they can really pitch, and I think that people talk about their offense, but they can pitch, and they're tough. They're deep. They've got some really good young arms, and the Giants are they're a rival to us. They give us fits, and it's going to be interesting to see what direction and how they kind of go about things with Farhan. But when you got Buster Posey and Madison Bumgarner, it's a pretty good. They got some good ingredients, and Brandon Crawford's a guy I've always really liked watching. And then you got the Dodgers, who I see at the top again.
David, the team is still looking for the catcher, but what's going to be the expectation or pressure to Austin?
I don't think that there's any more pressure that we can or I can put on Austin. I think that he's so competitive and expects a lot of himself, and he had a bad year offensively, and he knows it, and he's going to be considerably better this year. So him behind the plate, blocking, receiving, relationship with the pitchers is next level, is elite. So I expect him to come back ready to compete, but I trust Austin, and he's a winning player for me.
What do you envision as that piece to pair with him or to take the lion's share?
Well, I think for us, we don't have to make that decision right now. I think that obviously if you look at what's out there, there's a couple different directions we could go. And until we make that decision, right now, we feel comfortable with Austin. And do we have to have somebody to pair with them? Absolutely. But if you look at the guys coming, Will Smith is going to be a fun player to watch and watch develop. Cabert, Ruiz is another one. So on the catching front, but right now, yeah, we're looking to kind of complement Austin. Yeah.
Dave, second base hasn't really been mentioned as a position of need. Do you see that because of Hernandez and Taylor both being able to play there? And also, do you feel comfortable with Muncy playing the second base next year?
We do. We do. I think that we have some very good options at second base. Kike is a plus defender at second base. We like Taylor over there, the versatility with both those guys. And also, I trust Max over there at second base. So can I see him being there every day? Probably not. But we expect Max to get a ton of at-bats next year, and at first base and at second base.
Does having Freeze make Cody's splits less problematic for you?
Well, I think they do. David is a guy that, we all know David and like the professional at bat, and against left-handed pitching, really like him in the batter's box. But the goal is to have Cody out there every day. Just the way he can defend and how he can affect a game and impact a game with his legs, with the bat. So, no, the goal is to have him be out there and handle lefties and righties. Excuse me, Andy? Andy, we always got to keep our be open to things, you know, but just try to stay ahead of the curve so, you know, the opener doesn't get us. So we're not hitting for guys in the second hitter of the game.
Dave, given the background of your new hitting coach, what does that say, I guess, about the rate of change in the game and the fact that these guys are going kind of figures in the background, the guys that are now?
Well, I think the change is the demographic of the player. So the position player group, this is me speaking off the cuff, is a lot younger. I don't know the number. So now when you got these young players, someone's got to be able to connect with them. And so Robert, Brownie, Aaron Bates, we have guys that we feel very confident in their content and their ability to connect with a young player. So when you're looking at Justin Turner, who now sort of becomes an outlier on major league rosters. And so when you got the 20-somethings, and so we have guys that we feel very comfortable reaching out and connecting with Corey Seager, Cody Bellinger, you know, Max Muncy, Chris Taylor, Kike, whoever.
Dave, I believe you crossed paths with Dino during your time.
I have.
What's, and I'm sure you're involved with Pastime, what can you tell us about him and what do you think he brings to the Dodgers?
So Dino is one of the best third basemen, if not the best third base coaches in the game. Being with, working with Soch, what he's done with the infielders, and he's done some outfield with the Angels. Base running, they've been one of the better base running teams in the last decade. So his experience, his preparedness, and his ability to connect with players and teach them. So we lost a good coach in Chris Woodward. But to have a guy that's been in that box for many years and done well and has taught infielders how to catch the baseball, and he's very well versed, a person who's loyal and was a Dodger. So I know he's thrilled to be back in Dodger blue. So he had a good run in Anaheim, but he's excited to be I'm going to say something, but it might be taken the wrong way. Be back with the Dodgers. I got to watch myself these days.
You guys are a big believer in the shift. You use it well. It works for you well, number-wise. But speaking philosophically, and you played the game earlier before analytics became so big, is baseball a better game with the shift or without it?
You going to try to get me into trouble with the commissioner? In my opinion, I think that I would say just kind of in a vacuum without the shift. But I still believe the players should be able to, it should be important enough to get on base, to be able to manipulate the bat and hit the ball the other way, or to lay a bunt down. So I will say, as far as offensively, philosophically for us this year, we're going to get better at that. When you see one player on the left side of the infield and you're down a run, we're going to challenge our guys to find a way to hit it over there. So, but how you got to do that by practicing. So it's going to be a priority for us to get better at that. I think that's fair, but I just believe that the pitcher dictates. So when you have weaknesses potentially that can be exploited, the pitcher has every opportunity to exploit a hitter's weakness. low-hanging fruit for the hitter, I think it's just got to be a commitment to. Hitters are very creatures of habit, whether it's staying in the same spot in the batter's box, whether it's not changing your approach, as far as you feel you're giving up something if you're not trying to hit a homer. So I think it's more of a philosophical commitment mentally, psychologically for the hitter. I think that's the opportunity. But as far as the data, yeah, on the hitting side, you see what pitchers are doing and tendencies, but ultimately, you can't predict what they're going to do, Well, we see Alex as a starter, and I'm all for what he feels comfortable doing. You look at 2 years ago, he had a tremendous year, and went away from the windup. And I think that he just wasn't, in talking to Alex, wasn't really synced up mechanically with his delivery all year. So going back and to the windup, I think that if he feels good about it, I know Rick Honeycutt feels good about it. So I'm in on that. But still, there's going to be times that he's going to have to still go from the stretch. So, when he does go from the windup, I think it's great.
I think that's about 9 guys now that you said you see as starting pitchers.
And it goes back to my original purging comment. So,
Look like they might be.
well, I think that we just don't need to make that decision right now. So we've seen how our roster can shake out, but in December, I think you can still have 9 starters.
Again, you have the 9 starters, but there's a Japanese lefty starting pitcher.
Is that right?
How much do you know?
Can I say his name, or am I going to get in trouble saying his name? No, we've seen him, and he's very interesting. Good stuff, good arm, performed in Japan. So how that plays out, I have no idea, but he's going to make any team much better.
David, have you been in touch with Rich O?
I haven't talked to Rich. I haven't talked to Rich yet, but I plan on it. Talked to him after the season, right after the season. And I think for me, with him, family, getting back to the East Coast, he likes to hunker down. And so we had a good conversation after the World Series, so it's not anything I felt I needed to follow up with. We're in a good place.
When you talk about hitting the opposite way and bunting to beat the shift, is that something that, how do you go about practicing that and getting better at it? Is that something you can actually practice on 75-mile-an-hour BP pitches, or is it more live batting practice?
Well, it starts. You can absolutely practice it. It's your bat path, and so there's a mechanical thing that I could talk for a lot longer than you guys probably want about that. But yeah, it goes to practicing and intent. So you can certainly do that. We will do that in our work, in the cage, and on the field. And yeah, when you take it out to spring training and to live at bats, it should kind of carry over. Yeah.
With relievers in their year-to-year volatility, where does that come from? Why do you think that happens?
That's one of the toughest, markets. Any executive will tell you to find a guy that is consistent. Those are hard to find, and it's very volatile. It's the usage piece. They're leaned on a lot, and so it's with the reliever, it's max effort. And so when you get the guy that can post 70+ times for 3-4 years, those are still hard to find, and they're a premium. So I think that if you look at our roster and how we've tried to manage them and try to minimize their usage, but when you play through October 2 years in a row, that's hard to do. To your question, I don't know why there's so much volatility. I just know it's very difficult. So if you got a guy on the come, let us know, and we'll get him. We'll sign him. But it's tough. I mean, but I do think that we've done a very good job of trying to match these guys up, our relievers, with particular hitters or a run of hitters to have them have success. So I think we do a pretty good job of that.
On that same line, Pedro Baez, kind of last year went from,
He was a fan favorite, wasn't he?
Yeah. What do you think changed for
It's amazing how that changes, right? Well, we've always had faith in Pedro, and he had a rough stretch for a while there last year, but man, he answered the bell, and he had a tremendous year. And I couldn't be happier for him. Guys like him on the team, and he's going to be a staple for us next year. So it takes a mentally tough player to kind of withstand coming out of that gate in left field, and your home fans are, not singing your praises, not clapping for you, and you still got to go out there and bow your neck and get it out. So I give a lot of credit to Pedro, a lot. And when you're talking about a Latin player who can't go out there and, really express himself, in Los Angeles, it's tough. He's fighting. I mean, it's tough on Latin players, and so I'm very sensitive to that as well. But this guy works as hard as anybody, and very, very happy for him. That's emotional for me because I'm happy for him, the way he handled things.
Any concern that he won't get to face Paul Goldschmidt anymore?
That I was very happy to see. Goldie, he can stay in the Central as long as he wants. Trying to work in getting him in the American League next. But Goldie, gosh, man, one of my favorite players to watch. And so to get him out of our division, it's great. I hope he's happy. I got to send him flowers.